Hello and welcome to another edition of our podcast, Recycle, Don't Be a Waster. In today's episode, I think we're going to talk a little bit about sensible first steps, sensible steps in achieving objectives. Not saying to people don't shoot for the sky, not saying that by any means, but at the same time, it's better to get halfway there than to not get anywhere at all due to being overly optimistic. And I suppose the example we're going to use an example of a shopping centre food court and the recycling systems in place there, because I know that it does annoy, in many ways it annoys people when you see a lot of things being thrown in the general waste or the red bin that in theory could be recycled. But I suppose I just want to use that as a basis for discussing a sensible waste management plan and what, maybe some of the rationale behind that. So I think, what is a waste management plan or a recycling plan? We work with a lot of companies on these, how you can go from where you are today, which could be, let's assume, everything's going into general waste, and how you can, as a business, as a group of people, as a school, whatever it might be, an office, how you can move from that position to hopefully recycling much, much more, hopefully getting close to recycling everything, or achieving your objectives, which could be, reducing cost, because obviously recycling is cheaper in most instances. It could be just be helping the environment or whatever it is. So one thing we always say is you have to be realistic about what is achievable and realize the difficulties and work with that in mind. So let's think about the food court. So in a food court, you'll have hundreds, potentially thousands of people every day sitting down, taking food from various outlets, fast food restaurants, cafes, different types of food, different types of packaging, no real uniformity on the materials, on what goes into items, etc. And so it's a real mixture. And then you have generally in the food, and obviously certain shopping centres will be different, but we're talking in general terms here. There will be certain types of bins. And one thing I've often noticed is that the recycling options are reasonably limited. And often they are improving, but often they were limited to bottles and cans. And maybe just the rest was general waste. Even often you would not even have a cardboard bin. And I suppose, you'd ask yourself, why is this? Because clearly, you could put food waste into an organic waste bin. You could put the glass into a glass bin. You could put plastics into plastic. You could, if the shops had cardboard containers, they could go into a cardboard bin. And, you could quite easily recycle a huge amount of the waste. I'll be honest, the simple answer is that you will not achieve the objectives that you set out to get, because the great public, Australian public, is like any other population. It's a spectrum, with certain people who are massively keen on recycling and will take that extra step, certain people who don't care, and then obviously with any distribution curve, you'll have the people in the middle, the vast majority. But you'll also have people who don't understand, people who potentially can't read, and different aspects like this. And so you will almost certainly recycle less than you expect that you would. And you will have a higher degree of contamination. Even in the bottles and cans, people will still drop in general waste, either by accident or again, just due to carelessness or not caring. People will drop in remainders of food, etc., into that bin. And you will end up with a situation where potentially it's not recyclable at all due to the sheer contamination. And so I think it is sensible that you go with, you should certainly have a commingled recycling in that instance, and nearly all do. Not everyone by any means, but most will have a commingled there for the bottles and cans. And even just, I think it's limited to the bottles and cans, just to make it super, super clear for people that it's plastic bottles, Coke bottles, whatever it is, and it is the, and then it's the cans, metal, aluminium cans, because then you're confident that will be recycled. Unfortunately, then a huge amount of waste is still going into landfill in the general waste category. And it's, how do you, I think we've talked about wish cycling on previous episodes. You could, in theory, put in place 5 different bins. You could have infinite variations. But the reality is that a lot of it will just get contaminated by the public because there's no responsibility. There's no direct line of responsibility from the person who dumps the waste to the person who, I suppose, fundamentally has to pay for that waste being processed. If, in a private business, in a private house, whatever it is, there's a direct line of responsibility, and you can say who, and because of that, then you'll get better outcomes. If you're running your own business, if it's in a warehouse or whatever business type it is, you can control that. You can have education for the staff. You can, to some extent, police it, to use that word, which might have negative. You're policing people's behaviour a little bit, but there's the carrot and the stick approach, I suppose, and obviously the carrot is a much more pleasant method of doing it. But to get the outcome that you want, you will need to have some systems in place to reach that recycling level that you need. So what does this really mean to us? I suppose another example, just before I move on, would be like pop concerts or large events, comedy shows, music festivals, outdoor cinemas, those sort of things. Often at those you will have fewer, you might be given some general waste bins, and then you'd be given a fewer number of commingled bins. And often it is, you recycle less than you think you will, again, because people just will dump it wherever they can. Often the bins might be overflowing. I think we've all been at events where bins are overflowing, there aren't enough bins, etc. And people will just dispose of waste realistically wherever they can. And you'll see this at events such as, any outdoor event in Australia, such as Australia Day, those sort of events where you have large amounts of people congregating, and they're doing the right thing. They're trying not to litter or spoil the environment, but at the same time, then this leads to low recycling percentages, and it just basically becomes a hygiene issue, getting rid of that waste, and it will be going to landfill. So I suppose the lesson here is you have to take logical, sensible steps. Let's not wish cycle. You have to think about how we are implementing steps along the line. Do the easiest ones first. And this is, in a business, we always say, do cardboard first. Cardboard is, I think everybody understands what cardboard is. A cardboard box, put that in, flatten it, it's large, put it in the blue bin, and that will immediately save you money. Once that's being successful, then you can implement the next step, which may, of course, be, in nearly all cases, the commingled bin. But there could also, with that, be a little bit more. You'll risk higher risks of contamination. You'll have higher risks of misunderstanding, and of course, this is even more pertinent in the situation of a food court where you may have tourism. You may have people who English may not be their first language. You may have, obviously all ages, and in society, everybody is in that environment. So you have all different views, education levels, approaches, backgrounds. Focus on recycling. Prioritization of it. So I suppose you have to work on the most sensible way of doing it. And over time, I think we are getting better at this. We're getting better at packaging the recycling, the bins, color coding them with national color codes, so people are subliminal, in the back of their mind, subconsciously almost, they know which bin to use. And I think all these approaches are becoming more beneficial. You'll even see the cavity in the bin that you put the waste into, it can often be shaped. So the drinks one could be shaped in a circle. So it suggests even to you that there should be a drinks container. And those sort of things are effective, and they do work. And I think over time, you'll be seeing more and more of this sort of stuff that, I suppose you have to hit it from every side. You have to hit it from education, color coding, posters, branding, simple wording. I'll be honest, I think I was at, I think it used to be Guzman and Gomez, I think used to have, I actually did find their, some of their bins, the branding on their bins for commingled quite confusing, because I think it used to say stuff like aluminium and drink containers or something along those lines, quite long words, and rather than saying commingled recycling, which people would be used to seeing. And I think they've changed that in recent times, but that was, at one point in time, I felt that was a little bit confusing. And I think it's you have to keep things uniform. It has to be clear. It has to be probably wording. So let's say what should these bins have? They should have standard colours. blue, whatever it is, blue, red, the yellow ones. The people know, don't mix them up, don't mix them around. You should potentially have pictures of what can go in. If it's bottles and cans, put pictures of bottles and cans there. Be super clear, because even if you're not wish cycling, the person putting in place this system, a lot of people will innately want to recycle more. So they'll be thinking, oh, will this coffee cup, that's a drinks container, that can go in here. Or this, plastic container, that can go in there. And it's, everyone has their own view. If it's not super clear, people will, again, you have a spectrum of, people not exactly agreeing or getting right what you think it should be. So I think it's, I think this is the psychological aspects of recycling. It's the psychological and sociological aspect of how we implement a recycling plan, what things we need to consider. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're dealing with large numbers of people. And when you're dealing with large numbers of people, you have to deal and accept that there is that spectrum. And then you have to tailor your expectations, tailor your objectives, and tailor your plan to match. So I think I'll leave it there today. I think this is a very interesting topic, and almost certainly we'll come back to discuss many aspects of this, the social aspects of it, the education aspects, even the color coding. And we'll discuss this again in a later episode. But I think I'll leave it there today. So I'll say, recycle. Don't be a waster.